So there are many new faces. I want to just take a moment to introduce myself, my background, who I am, where am I from. So my name is Chaim Fink. I am a rabbi ordained in Israel. And my family originates from a city in New York called New Rochelle, which is in the county of Westchester. I believe the Dick Van Dyke Show was filmed in New Rochelle. My mother is actually here with me today. It's an honor and a pleasure to have her here with us. Hi.
Hi.
So we moved to Michigan almost 3 years ago to date. It was June when we first moved to Michigan 3 years ago, and we are very much fond of this very warm community. Even in the winter it's warm here because the people are so special and nice and welcoming. So we are not deterred or scared by the Michigan winters, which are not as bad as they're cracked up to be. And I have 4 children with a 5th on the way. And beautiful children, thank God, who I'm very thankful for. And my wife as well is a teacher for Partners in Torah. She is the stronger of the two, in my opinion. And hopefully one day you'll have a chance to hear her. And that's what I do, I teach. I love teaching Torah to Jews. I love teaching Torah to everyone. It's an incredible book of wisdom. And what I hope to explore with you today is just taking the weekly Torah portion. You know, the Torah is divided up into 5 books. And each of those books has about, roughly, on average, 10 parshas or sections. And each week in the synagogue, they read a small section of the Torah. And what I like to try to find is relevance and meaning, looking at the words of each week's Torah portion. And these are events and episodes that happened so long ago. And try to find ways to make it relevant for today in 2017. In case you're worried about me going over time, I've never ended a speech even a minute late. You know, there was once a rabbi who was in the middle of a speech. It was supposed to be a 5-minute talk. And everyone knew that he had a propensity to going overtime. So after he spoke for about 10 minutes, the person in charge of the event slipped him a note that said 5 more minutes max. And he took the note and he held it in his hand and he didn't have a chance to look at it. He was so into whatever he was saying. 20 minutes later, he opens the note and says, "Oh, I have 5 more minutes." And he goes on to teach for 5 more minutes. So that won't happen here. One thing that my father taught me is that you need to end a talk on time. He also said no one ever complained that a rabbi's speech was too short. As a matter of fact, the joke goes that there was a rabbi who, after a long life, at a ripe old age, he passes on, he goes to heaven. Some of you may have heard this joke from me before. And the rabbi doesn't get the warm welcome that he had hoped for. His whole life, he was a shepherd to God's children. And a few straggling angels come to welcome him into heaven. He expected a reception. Shortly thereafter, they're rolling out the red carpet in heaven, and the band is playing and striking up the band. And who are they welcoming in? It's an Israeli bus driver. And the rabbi says to the angels, "I don't understand. Look at these tens of thousands of angels that are welcoming him. Me, I get a few straggling angels. Why?" And they explained to him, they said, "Rabbi, when you did your job, people went to sleep. When this bus driver did his, they would pray." And I lived in Israel for a number of years. I was fortunate to live there for 9 years. Right after my wife and I got married, we picked up and we moved to Jerusalem, some of the fondest years of my life. And I can tell you, when I was on those buses, I prayed too. I want to begin today's class. So today's class we're going to take the weekly Torah portion, which is a really hard name to pronounce, but it's called Beha'aloscha. That ch sound is not the easiest. In New York, I was once buying some clothing in a men's clothes store. And the fellow behind the counter says to me, "What's your name?" And because the ch sound doesn't come natural to people, and I'm Chaim. So he says, "What's your name?" And well, Chaim is spelled C-H-A-I-M. And I said, "My name is Chaim," because that's how it is. That's how it's spelled. So Chaim. So he looks at me with a twinkle in his eye, as only would happen in New York, and he says, "That's really Chaim, isn't it?" You got me. So Beha'aloscha, that is the name of the Torah portion of the week. And what it means is that, just to go through the meaning of the name of the Parsha, the weekly portion, it means that when you will cause to go up, and it refers to the lighting of the special candelabra that was present in the temple called the menorah. When you will cause those flames to go up, and it's a command to Aaron the high priest to light the menorah, we will come back to that hopefully at some point. But I want to skip with you, if it's okay, we'll do things a bit topsy-turvy today. I want to start with the end and move our way back to the beginning. And if we take a look on our source sheets, the very last source on page 5 is a quote of Mark Twain, also known as Samuel Clemens. Mark Twain was the pen name. Very last source on page 5. Says Mark Twain, I'll read this with you inside. If the statistics are right, the Jews constitute but 0.25% of the human race. We are not a numerous people. We never were, we never will be. It suggests a nebulous puff of stardust lost in the blaze of the Milky Way. Properly, the Jew ought hardly to be heard of. But he is heard of. He has always been heard of. He is as prominent on the planet as any other people. And his importance is extravagantly out of proportion to the smallness of his bulk. Beautiful words. You know, they once asked someone from China, they said, how many Jews do you believe there are in the world? And the Chinaman said, at least 100, 200 million. Based on all the noise they make, they're on the front cover of the paper just about every day. There must be, and he meant it seriously, a few 100 million Jews. Not correct. We are probably 0.25% of the world population, minuscule. His contributions to the world's list of great names in literature, science, art and music, finance, medicine, and the abstruse learning are also very out of proportion to the weakness of his numbers. You know, if you go through the Nobel Prize winners, and you look at how many Jews there are, it's 20% in medicine, science is about 30, literature is 25, economics is 50. Well, I wouldn't say that we have all of it, but I would say maybe perhaps we know how to manage it well. And it is far out of proportion to our numbers. And that is what Mark Twain here is noticing, calling to our attention. He has made a marvelous fight in this world in all ages, and has done it with his hands tied behind his back. Our existence is despite the persecution which we've suffered throughout the ages, expulsion from Spain, the Crusades, the Cossacks, the Holocaust. And we're here. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. The Egyptians, the Babylonians, and the Persians rose. They filled the planet with sound and splendor, but then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greeks and Romans followed and made a vast noise, and they were gone. Other people have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but it burned out. And they sit in twilight now and have vanished. His closing paragraph. The Jew saw them all, survived them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert but aggressive mind. All things are mortal, but the Jews. All other forces pass, but he remains. And he closes with the question, what is the secret of his immortality? Every Passover Seder night, we read the Haggadah, a special book dedicated for Passover evening. And there we say that in every generation, B'chol dor v'dor, Omdim Aleinu, our enemies rise up against us. ISIS and Iran, they speak of the destruction of the Zionist state. They are Omdim Aleinu l'chalosinu. They try to remove us, eradicate us, distinguish our flickering flame from this world. But there's one constant, and that is v'hakadosh baruch hu matzilenu miyadam. God will always save us. He will always preserve us. That they don't have the ability to realize their dream. And the question that I want to explore with you today, and I believe the secret lies in this week's Torah portion, is the answer to Mark Twain's question. What is the secret to our existence? As Mark mentioned, empires rose and they have fell. The Babylonians, the Greeks, they persecuted us. They destroyed our temple. And then came the Romans and they destroyed the second temple. The Germans, the Nazis are no longer here. You know, growing up, I'm going to mention this story because my mother is with us. Growing up at the age of 5 or 6, I was quite the rambunctious young man. My wife didn't believe it when she first married me, but she sees that those roots, they run deep, and I still have that twinkle in my eye. And we had in our synagogue a man by the name of Harry Weinberg. And Harry Weinberg was a survivor of the Holocaust. He was from Hungary. And he witnessed the murder of his entire family. They lined him up and they shot them down, and he was spared. And he went to Auschwitz. He survived that. And when he was in the depths of hell in Auschwitz, he said to himself, if I survive this ordeal, I want to become a candy man in shul and synagogue. And after witnessing the murder of so many children, I want to bring joy to Jewish children. I'm going to be the guy who in my tallis bag keeps a stash of candy, and I'm going to give candy to Jewish children. And I was one of his best customers. I still remember him saying in his Hungarian accent, "Again, Chaim." And Harry Weinberg, after the war, went back, which not all survivors were able to do. He went back to Auschwitz. And he stood where the commandant once stood. They had something called the Peltplatz, where they would line up the prisoners, regardless of the weather outside, in the tattered clothes that they had, freezing cold, sweltering heat. And they would do roll call. It would last for a very long time. It was one of the ordeals that people went through. You know, when you read about the Holocaust, I'm going to digress from a digression for a moment, I'll come back. When you read about the Holocaust, you read about terrible suffering. When you hear the story, as I just did this past Sunday, I heard a story from a man named Manny Middleman. And I'll share an insight of his with you later in the class. And he speaks about his experience going on the trains, on the cattle cars. There are certain nuances that you won't know unless you hear a first-hand account. For example, he says that on these cattle cars that they were packed for days, sometimes even a week. They didn't have any water. The only provisions they had was what they packed, and it wasn't usually enough. And he speaks of the thirst, the dryness, licking the walls of the cattle car to try to get some condensation, moisture. The part that stood out in his mind most was the embarrassment of the fact that there were no facilities with which one could relieve themselves in a respectable manner. And you were standing in front of other people, forced to do your bodily functions in front of others. Humiliating. That was what stood out in his mind most prominent. He spoke of the clogs that you wore on your feet, how each step was painful because they didn't give you shoes because they were concerned you would perhaps run away. Going back to my first digression. Harry Weinberg, my candy man, so he went back to Auschwitz, the Appellplatz, where they would do roll call. He stood where the commandant once stood. Hanging in his living room, in his beautiful home in New Rochelle, were two pictures prominently displayed. One was of Auschwitz during its functional years, in the 40s and the early 40s, with the commandant doing Appellplatz in his imposing hat, famous to the SS. And the photograph right next to it was Harry Weinberg standing where the commandant once stood. And it's a strange photographs to hang on your wall. But he said that every time he enters into his dining room to eat breakfast, he's reminded of the fact that we are still here, and they are not. Harry Weinberg went on to build a beautiful family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And he definitely brought a lot of joy to Jewish children. So we outlived our tormentors, and we did it every time. Every time they rose up against us and they tried to annihilate us, we outlived. There's another enemy of the Jewish people, and that's the enemy that we face nowadays. And we will survive that too. That's the enemy of assimilation. Jews leaving anything Jewish, becoming part of American culture, trying to hide the fact that they're Jewish, not attending, not associating themselves with synagogues, marrying non-Jews, raising non-Jewish families, and then Jews are lost that way. And that's another way that civilizations, that empires crumble and fail. Because I ask you, friends, what happened to the Romans? Did somebody create a great Holocaust that said we're going to kill all those Romans? What happened to the Greeks and the Persians? There was no genocide. It was assimilation. That was the changing of the guard of cultures. And that's an enemy that the Jewish people face now. And I want to address that too, how God provided a system to make sure that we will never assimilate. So now let's go back to the beginning. We're going to turn back now to the beginning on page 1, source 1. Julie Andrews once said, let's start from the very beginning, a very good place to start. That was from The Sound of Music, I believe. Right. By the way, I always remember the song Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do with your female there, and that's one of the magical sevens. The number 7 in Judaism represents the natural world. There are 7 musical notes in the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. I would sing for you, but I'm not a singer. You know, I one time was knocking on someone's door in Israel, and I have this terrible habit where I hum to myself when I get lost in thought. I knocked on the man's door. He was a bit late in responding, and I start humming, I start thinking, and he answers the door. He says to me in Hebrew, "Atah chazan? You're the cantor." And my response was, "Ken, ani chazan b'miglachat." I am the king cantor in the shower. That's the extent of my expertise when it comes to singing. But the idea of 7 in Judaism is the natural world. There are 7 notes in the musical spectrum. There are 7 days in the week. And as Jews, we try to take the natural order of things and we try to elevate it beyond that to the 8. And that's, by the way, the reason why we always give circumcision to a baby on day number 8. On day number 8. Because the baby is born natural. But we're trying to show that in Judaism we believe that our mission, our goal in this world is to take the natural and elevate it and perfect it. You know, we're born imperfect, not only physically, but we're born imperfect with our character traits. We're born flawed. And we're meant to work that through and elevate that too. And that's just the message of the number 7, which I was reminded of because of the sound of music, because we're starting from the very beginning. So, I sometimes digress, I'm sorry. But I come back. All right. So, this is a quote from the weekly Torah portion. And it's going to be painful to read because of the verbosity, because of the redundancy, because of the repetition. And I actually want you to experience that. I want you to see how redundant, how repetitive it is, because that's going to be a question of why. The Torah, which is so concise, so succinct, so pithy when it comes to the usage of words, why is it that it elaborates at such an extent for these words? But let's read through them together. It speaks of the way the Jews would travel in the desert. You know, the Jews, when they left Egypt, they were in the desert for 40 years, wandering, traveling, encamping, setting up camp, and then packing up and moving again. And the question is, how did the Jews know the direction? There was no GPS telling them where to go. And the answer is that the Jewish camp was guided by a cloud called the cloud of glory. That was God's manifestation, leading, guiding, showing the people which way to go. And wherever the cloud would stop, that would mean it's time to set up camp. When the cloud would start to move, pack your bags and get going. And that is what is being described at this next selection from this week's Parsha that we're going to read. So, it says, on the day the tabernacle was the portable temple known as the Mishkan in Hebrew, and that is where the Jews served God in the desert. On the day the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered the tabernacle. That was a tent for the testimony. That's referring to the tablets. And in the evening there would be like a fiery appearance until morning. And so it would always be. The cloud would cover it, and there would be an appearance of fire by night. And whenever the cloud was lifted from the top of the tent, afterwards the children of Israel would journey. And in the place where the cloud would rest, there the children of Israel would encamp. According to the word of Hashem, God, would the children of Israel journey, and according to the word of Hashem would they encamp. All the days that the cloud would rest upon the tabernacle, they would encamp. Okay, so far, so good. Here's where it gets tricky. When the cloud lingered upon the tabernacle many days, the children of Israel would maintain the charge of Hashem and they would not journey. That means if the cloud was stationary for a good number of days, the Jews said, we're going to stay put. Sometimes the cloud would be upon the tabernacle for a number of days. According to the word of Hashem, would they encamp, and according to the word of Hashem, would they journey. And sometimes the cloud would remain from evening until morning, and the cloud would be lifted in the morning and they would journey. Or for a day and a night, and the cloud would be lifted and they would journey. Or for 2 days, or a month, or a year, when the cloud would linger over the tabernacle, staying in its place, the children of Israel would encamp and would not journey. But when it was lifted, they would journey. Now, it gives us a lot of different increments of time. Sometimes the cloud would be there for just a day. Sometimes a day and a night. Sometimes 2 days. Sometimes a month. Sometimes a week. Sometimes a year. So long as it stayed put, they would stay encamped in their each proper direction. When it would move, they would move with it. Wouldn't it suffice to say, whenever the cloud stayed, they stayed put. When the cloud moved, they would follow. End of story. right? That's the Torah is going at great length to teach us something here. It's not random. This is the Word of God. I believe firmly that every word in the Torah came directly from God. And he wasn't just saying it because he didn't get paid by word. He wasn't paid by the word. Every word has meaning. What is the meaning hidden here in the verbiage of this explanation of how the cloud would rest on the tabernacle? Is that a fair question, ladies and gentlemen? Why so many words? Okay, let's move on. We're turning out to page 2, and we're looking at source 2, which is a quote from one of the classic commentators of the Torah, a man known by the name of Nachmanides. I see Rashi as King Rashi. Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki is the number 1 commentator on the Torah, and the Rambam was written afterward. He takes the second spot after Rashi. In the olden days, you were often named after your father. So his father was named Nachman, a nice Jewish name. Nachmanides means the son of Nachman. If the name Maimonides is familiar to you, that is a contemporary of Nachmanides, and that is Rabbi Moshe, the son of Maimon. He took the name of his father, Maimon, and became to be called Maimonides. And he explains why the Torah goes to such great length to tell us about the cloud lingering for different amounts of time. And he said, when the Torah speaks of the lengths of time which the cloud rested on the tabernacle, it is trying to emphasize a point. If the cloud lingered for a very long time in an undesirable location, imagine you're in an area, and there are the desert. It's not a hospitable place, and there are sometimes animals howling at night. The wind blows strong. The sun is beating down on you by day. And imagine you're in one such location, and you're wishing, I wish we could leave from here. I don't want to stay here anymore. But there were times that the cloud stayed in that undesirable location, and the people wanted to move on and leave that place. Nevertheless, they didn't go against the will of Hashem. And if the cloud would depart after only a short time, and the people were still tired out and exhausted from traveling, they didn't want to get up and continue journeying, they still followed after the cloud. And there were times when the cloud would only stop for one night, just one night, and they have to continue traveling the next morning, even though it would be a great burden for them. And there were even times when the cloud would only stop for a day and a night, which means that they had been traveling throughout the entire previous night. They just arrived at a new location, they would rest, and they would even think, when you stay somewhere for a little while, you think, okay, we're here for good, now let's unpack. They would unpack, but then after that night and a day, it would be time to start moving again. And they were constantly, they never knew when they were going to have to travel next. There was no warning, there was no indication up front for how long you're going to be in a location. It could be a bad location, they would stay there for a while. It could be a great, you finally come to this oasis where you get to see the beautiful wildlife that lives in the desert. If you've ever been to Israel, there's a beautiful oasis called Ein Gedi, near the Dead Sea. And among all this sand, you see beautiful streams, rivulets of water, and natural springs that come up from the ground, and animals like mountain goats and hyraxes, and beautiful birds soaring in the sky. And imagine you get to such a location, and you're like, finally, yes, this is like Aruba, this is amazing, right? Let's stay here for good. Next day, the cloud picks up and moves, and they would follow. And perhaps the most challenging part of it all, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I travel, I find the most unsettling part of traveling is this state of limbo. When your suitcases are packed, it's the day you're leaving. You're in Venice. And you're scheduled to leave at 11 p.m. You get to the airport with a good 3 hours. You're going to leave to the airport at 7 p.m. You pack up your belongings in the morning. You don't want to pay for another night at the hotel, right? So you pack up your suitcases, you put them in your rental car. I see a lot of nodding heads. We've been there together, right? You don't want to pay the extra night, so you load it in your car. And you don't have a home base. You're essentially homeless. There's no room that you feel attached to. That's a terribly unsettling feeling. Not to have a stationary base to call your own. That's what the Jews had in the desert every single time the cloud stopped. They didn't know when they were going to have to pick up and travel again. There was an American professor by the name of Abraham Maslow. And he taught at Brandeis University. And he taught that human beings, he created something called a hierarchy of needs. Humans have certain needs. For example, we have a need for food, very primary need. We have a need for shelter, for safety. And what his theory was is that the more basic needs that a person has, until those needs are satisfied, right, you don't have somebody who's starving, right? He's hungry, he doesn't have any food, and he says, oh, I wish I was more self-actualized, right? I wish I was more educated. Until your lower needs are met, you don't start worrying about whether or not all your potential is being utilized to the fullest ability. And I'll run through with you that pyramid because it's relevant, it's germane to our conversation. Now, I apologize if there are not enough source sheets. Next week, we will remedy that problem. I want to say a big thank you to Bela Berman. Bela Berman is the one who works in the office in Partners. And she's the one who makes sure that the delicious lunch is ordered every week. She makes sure that we have the source sheets printed, that the recording devices are here, and it's those wonderful, magical people behind the scenes that make so much of what Partners does possible. So, Bela, thank you very much. We could turn to page 3, and that's where we have the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. On the very bottom, he speaks of physical needs, and if it's small, I'll read it to you. He speaks of shelter, warmth, food and drink. Right? Being cold is terrible. If you've ever been cold and it's being too hot is difficult. You need shelter. And then he speaks about safety needs, where he speaks about security, structure, and the one I want most is stability. You need to feel stable. You need to feel like you have a platform, you have a base, a firm and solid base upon which to rest. Then he speaks about social needs and esteem needs and self-actualization at the pinnacle, at the height of his pyramid. But it's a very basic human need. It's level 2. To feel that you are stable, to feel that you have a home base. And that's why we feel so unsettled when we travel and our suitcases are packed. And that is what the Jewish people had every single time that the cloud rested. They didn't know how long they were going to be there. So I ask you, why? Why would God do this to them? If it's such a basic human need and we believe in the goodness and the beneficence of God, why would He create this scenario where we didn't feel any stability in our physical location? I believe the answer is as follows. What God wanted was that as a nation, keep in mind this is the very inception of the Jewish people as a nation. This is our making as a people. We just left Egypt and now our identity is being formed. And what God wanted was that our sense of stability, of identity, of feeling settled, shouldn't come from a physical locale, from a pinpoint on a map. Because we're a people that's destined to wander the globe. As Jews, we've lived everywhere. Every country out there, we have been present. And that's why you can go visit any country in Europe and you can see the Jewish history that's there. You can go to Italy, Padua, Venice, and you can see old synagogues. You can go to Spain, Barcelona, Madrid. You can go to Prague, Vienna, Austria as the country, Budapest, Poland, Warsaw, Lublin, Krakow. Every city has a Jewish history because every single city was a home to the Jews at some point. We've wandered the globe. We've been everywhere. If our sense of stability needed to come from a physical location, that wouldn't be setting us up for success as a people. And therefore, God created a scenario in our formation where we couldn't find stability in a place. What was the stability? It was the cloud. That's God. Wherever we are in the world, God has been there with us. As it says in the Torah, God says, one day I will cast you out of the land of Israel, and you will be dispersed across the 4 corners of the world. But wherever you go, I will go there with you. Our sense of stability comes from being close to our God, the cloud. And that's why we needed the situation of traveling. We never knew when the cloud was going to leave, but we knew that the cloud was with us. We always had that knowledge, and therefore we always felt secure. And that readied us, that prepared us for the journey that we were going to begin as a people, wandering around the world. I'll share with you a story. We speak of travel. I personally don't like to travel. Rabbi Burnham loves to travel. You name a city that he hasn't been and he wants to go there. I like being in one place. I like being with my family. Partners just did a trip to Lithuania and Israel. And I do okay at putting trips together. It's one of the skill sets that I was given, organizing the details of things. And I said to my boss, listen, I will put this trip together, but I don't feel that I'm needed. I would love to stay home. Unless you really feel that you need me, I'm going to sit this one out and I will run logistics from the ground. He said, no problem. Because that's my favorite hours of the day is from 5 to 7 when my family comes home. I have 4 children and my wife, and we have dinner together and I tell them bedtime stories. It's great. My mother was just there with me last night. I was telling my 5-year-old, and he has that twinkle in the eye that I once had. And we do a bedtime series about a young boy who was a troublemaker and all the pranks that I either did or dreamed of doing. And that kind of keeps him entertained before he goes to sleep at night. So I'm a family guy. I don't like to travel that much. But there's a story about a man who was a traveler for business. At least twice a week he was on an airplane. And these people that know how to travel, they don't get perturbed by some of the small things that would disturb our equilibrium. For example, if they announce the flight has been delayed and we don't know when the engine troubles will be fixed, it's happened to all of us, he just pulls out his laptop because he knows he packs his laptop, he packs work things that he needs to do, and he keeps himself busy. An experienced traveler will always know that you need to travel with an extra sandwich, perhaps peanut butter and jelly, which doesn't need refrigeration in your carry-on. So this way, if the flight is delayed, no problem. You pull it out. My wife is a good Jewish mother. She usually travels with enough food to feed the entire plane, which she can do for a few hours. Now, this traveler was once flying, and he notices something peculiar, something strange. There's a young girl by the age of 6 sitting by herself in one of the front rows, unaccompanied by an adult. Strange sight. You would think a responsible parent would make sure to travel with their young child. Airports are difficult areas to navigate. All the signs and directions, and sometimes in foreign languages. It could be tricky. Definitely not something which is meant to be done by a 6-year-old. He finds it strange. Then all of a sudden, they hit turbulence. And this is turbulence like this man who has been through a lot. He's never seen turbulence like this. The plane is literally rocking back and forth. People are screaming. The overhead compartments are being forced open by the pressure. Things are falling out. He's looking at everyone's knuckles. You see a lot from people's body language. People's knuckles are white. They're clenching anything they can. There's one exception. The 6-year-old girl. She's cool. She's calm. She's collected. She's sitting out. Little kids often like sit on their knees. She's sitting on her knees on the chair holding her doll, undisturbed by the pandemonium which has broken out around her. Turbulence stops. Everyone says a little prayer to God saying thank you. Some of them thought their life was over, and they reach their destination. As this seasoned traveler is getting off the plane, he stops next to the 6-year-old girl and he says to her, I have 2 questions for you, young lady. Question number 1, why are you flying alone? Question number 2, why when the whole plane, and these are people who have lived life a lot longer than you, and they all were scared, why were you so cool and calm? And she said, I'll tell you why. It's very simple. You see, my daddy, he brought me onto the plane. He sat me down in my chair, he buckled me in, he kissed me on the forehead. And he said, sweetheart, honey, little girl, I want you to see here, everything's going to be good, everything's going to be great. I have to go now and fly the plane. So she said, my daddy's the pilot. He wasn't not with me. He was sitting a few rows ahead of first class. And he told me everything's going to be okay. I knew he was the one flying this plane. He's a great pilot. He'll get us through this. I wasn't worried for a second. And I believe that's an analogy for us as Jews in this world. We got a big daddy, guys, upstairs. And he says things might get a little rough, a little turbulent. Things might shake a little bit. Things will start to look like they're falling apart. But I got you covered. I'm going to be flying this plane with the Jewish people. I'll make sure that you guys will weather the storm.
Look at that one.
You will live to see another tomorrow. So, this is great. You know, we've covered so far why it is the Torah dedicates so many verses to describing the method of travel, the length of days upon which the cloud would rest, is to show us that we never had stability from a location, and the reason why we couldn't feel that our sense of security came from a physical locale because we were wandering around the world, chased out from one country to the next, to give us a sense that our security comes from God. That's, you know, I feel like that sometimes. I feel like when I travel with my wife, I feel like I'm at home, because I'm with my wife. When she leaves home, if she ever travels, I feel this sense that things are just not right. You know, it just doesn't feel right. We have our God. We travel with God, we're secure. But the question that I feel is begging to be asked is, well, why Was it necessary in God's plan for Jews to be forced out from one country to the next? Let us stay. Okay, if it's not going to be Israel because we need exile, let us stay in England. So they drive on the wrong side of the street. All right, we'll get used to it, you know? We'll drink tea for lunch every day with biscuits. I mean, that's awesome. Why can't we stay in one country? Why has our history always been one? It's always a repetitive cycle. You go to a country, we often start at the bottom of the ladder, which happened to Jews in America. I was talking to somebody yesterday who told me that his parent came as an immigrant, his grandparent came as an immigrant with a shirt on his back. And he built himself up, he built a business for his family. We always start at the bottom of the ladder, at the bottom of the totem pole, and we work hard. And we start to climb. And then at some point, we're either expelled, exiled, killed, pogromed. What's the story with that? How does that fit into God's master plan for the Jewish people? And I believe this, friends, is perhaps the answer to Mark Twain's question. Now let us examine together another source. We're going to skip source 4. We're going to move right on to source 5. This is a comment by a rabbi known as Rabbi Meir Simcha of Devinsk. He lived in the mid to late 1800s, early 1900s. And he says the following. He says, let us try to understand just a bit of how God runs the world. Once God had decreed that the Jewish people must go into exile, wandering from land to land, he needed to find a way to ensure that we would survive as a people and not disappear by assimilating among the nations of the world. And that we said before, that is the reason for the demise of the Roman, of the Babylonian empires. It was simple assimilation. That's why you don't see those guys in togas anymore, holding javelins and spears. They assimilated. So it has always been the way of our people that we settled in a place for around 100, 200 years. And then a storm wind comes, and its swelling waters rise up, and it destroys and it scatters us without mercy. We flee and escape to another far-off location. And there we once again band together and reestablish ourselves as a nation. We accomplish great things and become very successful. But due to our achievement, we begin to forget that we are foreigners in a strange land. We begin to feel that this place is the rock from which we were hewn. I love his poetic words. We no longer look forward to and anticipate the redemption from Hashem. And then an even more imposing storm wave comes and reminds us, you are a Jew. Get out. Leave this land and go somewhere else. That has been the history of our people. You look at Spain in 1492. We had Jews who were the head treasurers of the country. Don Isaac Abarbanel. We had Jews who were philosophers, musicians, scientists, Einstein. And Jews begin to feel that they're not really Jewish, they're German. That is their sole identity. We begin to feel, as he writes later on in this essay, he says that Berlin has become the new Jerusalem. We've abandoned hope of ever being restored to our homeland. And Berlin, that's where we are. And he says that God's plan is that the Gentiles, the nations around us, they're the ones who prevent our assimilation. They're the ones who say, you're Jewish, you're different. They remind us. They force us out. And that has been the secret. It's a harsh secret. I wish it could be another way. But he said that is the secret behind our endurance. The fact that when Jews try to become non-Jews, the fact that when we try to say that we are Germans, not Jews, the Germans remind us, no, you're Jewish. And we're forced out and we reband and we rebuild, and our Jewish identity now is perhaps stronger than ever. There's more Torah being studied now than there ever has been in the past 1,000 years. We pick ourselves up and we build. And that's the secret to our existence as a people. That if we try to denounce our Judaism, others will help remind us of it. And that's why it was necessary to be moved from country to country. We never get comfortable, we never get assimilated. And if that is meant to be our future, that's why God had to prepare us in a way where our sense of stability came through our connection to God and not from any one specific geographic locale. So I think that's an interesting idea. I want to cover a few other ideas that are found in the Torah portion of this week. We will stop exactly on time. It's 12:44. 16 more minutes and not a minute more. Guaranteed. We spoke about the candelabra that was present in the temple, known as the menorah. It was beautiful, it was magnificent, it was made out of solid gold. Solid gold with one central branch, and there were 3 branches on either side coming up to the same height as the central branch. As a matter of fact, if you visit the city of Jerusalem and you go to the old city of Jerusalem, they have an exact replica made out of solid gold, exactly made to the specifications that the Torah describes and how to make it, on display. It's an incredible amount of gold. And I was once visiting with a group of guys and someone said, wow, this is just out here like that behind glass, we could steal it. I said, well, give it a try. You know, A, you can't lift it, and B, they have a lot of security cameras. You won't make it a step with it. That's the menorah. And they would light the menorah every single evening in the tabernacle and the temple. They would light it in the evening and it would burn. It would illuminate the inner sanctum throughout the nights. The amount of oil they used was the amount of oil that was necessary on the longest nights, those winter nights in December, in the Hebrew month of Teves. That was the amount of oil they used every single night. So, okay, the amount that we need for the maximum, we'll use that every night. And they used pure olive oil, just the first drop that came out of the olive. Only that was valid for kindling in the menorah. When the Torah speaks about how to create this incredible ornament, it gives a very specific command. And it says that you can't take separate metal pieces and weld them together. You need to take a solid block of gold, and you could cut into it, you could slice into it, you could hammer it out to try to draw out the different parts of it, but you're not allowed to take disparate parts and attach them together. That is a command that the Torah gives, which made its construction incredibly tedious and difficult. That's the way God wanted it to be. And what I found fascinating is that there are 2 other items described in the Torah. One of those 2 is in this week's Torah portion as well, where the Torah gives the identical command that when you create it, you can't take separate pieces and attach them. You need to make it out of a solid block, and you could hammer it out, you could bang it, you could do whatever you need to do, but you can't connect the pieces. What are the other 2? Well, the one mentioned in this week's Torah portion were the chatzotzrot, which were the trumpets. They had trumpets that they would use for the purpose of making announcements. Like if you wanted to make an announcement and you wanted to assemble, get the message to everybody, they didn't have Facebook back then. So they needed an alternate mode of communication. You couldn't have like a group WhatsApp where you just texted it and got to everybody. So Moshe would use trumpets, and when they blew on both trumpets, that meant everyone is meant to assemble, and he would say, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I have an announcement to make, and he would tell the people what they needed to hear. That's what they used the trumpets for, to bring the people together in order to make announcements. And again, those were made out of silver, but the Torah says that they need to be out of a solid piece. The third item. Anyone know the third item in the Torah where it says it has to be out of a solid block and you can't connect the pieces? The Ark. The Ark of the Covenant. If anyone ever saw the movie Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Ark that they used there is a pretty good replica. It gives you a good idea of what it actually looked like. And the Ark was a box. It was actually 3 boxes. One outer box made out of pure gold. There was an inner box made out of wood that was slightly smaller than the outer box. And then there was an innermost box made out of solid gold. So when you put all 3 boxes together, the wooden box was completely plated in solid gold. As a covering to the Ark, there was a special covering that had 2 cherubs, 2 angelic-looking beings with wings above their heads, with faces like children. And that was the covering of the Ark. And the Torah says, when you make this covering, I know you're going to be tempted. You want to just take these statues and you're going to want to weld them on. It's the easiest way to do it. Nope. You got to start with a solid block of gold. You got to bang, you got to cut, and you have to form this covering by using a solid block. And that's the only 3. Those are the only 3 items the Torah ever gives this interesting command. And I ask you, friends, what is the common denominator? Because I believe there is one that unites, that runs through all these 3 items, where the Torah would mandate, it would require us to build them out of a solid block. And this is a novel idea that I came up with. Each of these things was symbolic of something. The menorah was symbolic, and you speak about light. you always associate light with spirituality. And as Jews, we believe the greatest spiritual entity that we have is the Torah. It's the Word of God. The menorah symbolizes the spiritual light of Torah. And when you speak about what is it that unites Jews, what brings Jews together, it's often the Torah. You know, there are Jews that study something called Daf Yomi, which means they are studying one page of Talmud every day. And Jews in Sydney, Australia, in Manchester, England, and in New York City are all studying the same page of Talmud every day. So you could be visiting abroad, and you could find a class to study the page of Talmud. They'll be on the same page that you are. And specifically, it's the oral Torah, which is unique to Jews, because non-Jews took the Bible, the written Torah, the Old Testament, and they kind of have access to that. But it's the Talmud, it's the Mishnah, which is part of our oral tradition, which wasn't written down for a very long time until we felt that we wouldn't be able to remember it anymore. That is something exclusive and unique to the Jewish people. So when you speak about what unites Jews, I would say perhaps it's Torah, this great spiritual light. Therefore, it's no surprise that the Torah, when it speaks about an idea of unity, it wants you to make the menorah without having any fragmented pieces. Because if you ever have a chair, a piece of furniture, a table, a desk, and it's going to break, I ask you, where is it most likely to break? Where you have the solid piece of wood is going to crack in the middle, or at the joints, at the points where you connected separate pieces together? Definitely at the joints. That's always the weakest point. And if we want unity, we want the unity to be strong. And therefore the menorah, which is symbolic of Jewish unity through the Torah, one solid piece. There could be no weakest link, no points where it will fracture. When you think about the trumpets, what were the trumpets used for? On a very simple level, this is not even symbolic. They were used to bring people together. You would blow on the trumpets, they would hear them sounding and say, oh, it's time to unite, it's time to band together, there's an announcement coming. The two cherubs, what were those symbolic of? And this is a beautiful idea. They were symbolic, one of them was symbolic of the Jewish people, and the other one was symbolic of God himself. And whenever there was harmony, whenever we were in God's good graces, the two cherubs would be in a state of embrace. If we ran afoul, they would be not embracing each other. Those two cherubs symbolize the unity between God and the Jewish people. And again, the same idea. If you want a unity to be strong, there can't be any weakest link. There can't be a point where you connected separate pieces and it might break, it might crack over there. No point where it'll naturally crack. And that perhaps is an understanding of why specifically these three items the Torah commands us to make it out of a solid piece. A few more minutes, so I will cover one last idea from this week's Torah portion. The idea of in-laws. You know, in-laws are great, parents are even better. I'm not going to make any mother-in-law jokes now. Although I do have a few, but not for now.
Let us see now.
So, Moshe's father-in-law, Moses, the great leader of the Jewish people, his father-in-law is a man by the name of Jethro, and he comes to visit the Jewish encampment. And Moshe asks him, he says, please, stay here with us in the desert. Join us as we enter into the land of Israel. And he says an incredible phrase to his father-in-law, says, if you stay here with us, I'll say it in Hebrew, I'll translate it, V'hayisa lanu lo einoyim. You will be for us as eyes. And what does that verse mean? You will be our eyes. And I want to share with you 4 quick explanations what that means, because one of them has an incredible lesson to be learned. First of all, you have seen in the past, you with your eyes have seen all of the miracles that God has done for us in this desert. We have manna to eat, we have a miraculous well that goes with us. Stay, you've seen the incredible miracles. Number 2, though, is you can interpret it for the future. That you will be eyes for us, you will be able to see things that we can't see. You're an incredibly wise man, you will offer advice and counsel. And you'll help guide us. As actually Jethro does, he gives guidance to the judicial system that Moshe sets up. Third, says Rashi, another explanation, a person naturally always protects their eyes. The eye is a very sensitive item, and whenever you're about to get hit, you always protect your eye. You will be beloved as our eye. We will cherish you. We will value you. Even though you're not necessarily a son of Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, we will still cherish you just like one loves their eye. And the 4th explanation is the one I like most. And it goes as follows. The Jews experienced incredible miracles in the desert. What did they eat? 40 years you're in the desert, nothing's growing from the ground. The manna fell from heaven every morning. What did they drink? There was this well that traveled with them. The clouds of glory shaded and protected them. And there can come a point where you become jaded to the enormity, to the greatness of these miracles. Like, yeah, all right, I'll go outside, I'll get some breakfast from the manna that just fell from heaven. Like, what? Like, right? Imagine walking onto the scene nowadays. Like, this is incredible. But no matter how incredible something is, you get used to it. We have the ability to see. We could see. That's incredible. But we get used to it. Not everyone has the ability to see. And what Moshe is saying to his father-in-law, if you come and you join us now, you just showed up here. For you, all these things are new. This is novel. The fact that we just get food that falls from heaven, you're like, wow. We will be able to see it through your lens, through your perspective. You will be our eyes, means you will give us a new way of looking at it, a new appreciation. Though we have become jaded, we'll see it through your glasses, and we will appreciate it. And I'll close by sharing a thought related to this idea that I just heard from Mr. Manny Middleman, again a survivor of Auschwitz, who spoke to a group from partners on Sunday. The idea of appreciating things, not taking things for granted just because we have them. And he said that what they served in Auschwitz was this brown muck, this liquid that they called coffee. And he said that people would often equate it to the drudge that you would dig up from the bottom of the Detroit River, dilute it a little bit, call it coffee. But he said they had to drink it because that was their source of hydration. They didn't have any other liquid, they had to drink it. And he got used to it. He said he could drink it again now if he had to. And then he said, there are people that wake up in the morning and their spouse took the time, showed the kindness of brewing coffee, of putting up a pot of coffee for them. And they wake up and they pour the coffee. They either mix in sugar or don't. And they take a sip and say, this is too dark, too concentrated. It tastes like water. You didn't put enough coffee grind. Don't you know how I like it? And he said, appreciate the incredible gifts that we have in our life. That was the message that he took out, and I believe that's the message that we learned here from Yisro. I want to thank you all for coming. Rabbi Burnham will be back next week. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.